The rain fell hard that night, turning the city streets into shimmering rivers under the glow of streetlights. Officer James Mercer gripped his steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white with tension. Dark circles hung beneath his bloodshot eyes as he fought to stay alert. 36 hours, that's how long he'd been awake now. It wasn't supposed to be like this, but when Officer Reynolds had called in sick, someone had to cover the shift. Just get home, he muttered to himself, blinking hard to clear the fog in his mind. Just 15 more minutes and you can collapse into bed. The police radio had finally gone quiet after a day filled with one crisis after another. The domestic violence call at the Pinewood Apartments still played in his mind. The screaming, the crying children, the husband with a knife who nearly charged at him. James had talked him down, but the whole scene left him drained, hollow inside. His phone buzzed in the cup holder beside him. Probably his wife wondering when he'd finally be home. James glanced down for just a second, one tiny moment of distraction. That's when he heard the thud. Time seemed to slow as his eyes shut back to the road. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he saw something tumbling across the wet pavement, no someone. In the glow of his headlights, a wheelchair lay on its side, one wheel still spinning uselessly in the air. James slammed on his brakes, the police cruiser skidding several feet before stopping. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat as he threw open his door and ran toward the figure lying motionless on the road. No, 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 he whispered, dropping to his knees beside a young girl. She couldn't be older than 17, with long brown hair now plastered to her face by the rain. Her legs, noticeably thinner than they should be, lay at an awkward angle. "I'm a police officer," he said, his voice shaking as he checked for a pulse. "Can you hear me?" The girl's eyes fluttered open, confused and filled with pain. "My chair," she whispered. "Dad's gonna kill me if it's broken again." "Don't worry about the chair," James said, relief washing over him that she was conscious. "Just stay still. I'm calling an ambulance." People began gathering around them, emerging from shops and cars, their expressions shifting from concern to anger when they saw his uniform. "That's a cop car," someone in the crowd said. "He hit her." "I didn't see her," James tried to explain as he called dispatch, his hands trembling so badly he could barely operate his radio. "The rain, I just looked down for a second." A woman pushed through the crowd and knelt on the other side of the girl. "My name's Linda, I'm a nurse," she said, giving James a cold look before turning her full attention to the injured girl. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Ellie," the girl said, her voice stronger now despite the pain etched across her face. "Ellie Collins." "Ellie, we're going to take good care of you, okay? Can you tell me where it hurts?" As the nurse assessed Ellie's injuries, James stood up on shaky legs, stepping back to give them space. Shame and horror crashed over him in waves. In 12 years on the force, he'd never made a mistake this terrible. More police cars arrived, their flashing lights painting the wet street in alternating blue and red. James recognized Officer Patol approaching, concern etched across his face. "What happened here, Mercer?" he asked quietly. "I hit her, Dev," James said, his voice breaking. "I was looking at my phone for just a split second. I didn't see her crossing." Across town, in the glass and steel FBI building downtown, Special Agent Robert Collins was just closing his laptop, finally ready to head home after 18 hours of work. The case that had consumed him for months, a human trafficking ring operating across state lines, had finally resulted in arrests. 17 victims rescued, 8 traffickers in custody. It was a good day's work. His phone rang just as he was shrugging on his coat. Seeing his home number, he smiled, expecting to hear his daughter's voice congratulating him on closing the case. Instead, he heard his neighbor's voice, tense and hesitant. "Robert, there's been an accident. It's Ellie." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What happened? Is she okay?" he demanded, already moving toward the elevators. "She was hit by a car while crossing Maple Street. She's conscious. They're taking her to City General right now." "Who hit her?" Robert asked, his FBI training kicking in, gathering information automatically. There was a pause on the line before his neighbor answered. "That's the thing, Robert. It was a police officer." Something cold and hard formed in Robert's chest as the elevator doors closed in front of him. By the time he reached the hospital, the skilled investigator would be gone, replaced by something far more dangerous, a father whose child had been harmed. The emergency room doors slid open with a soft hiss as Robert Collins strode through them, his FBI badge already in hand. He didn't need to use it, not officially, but its weight in his palm steadied him, reminding him of who he was. A man who solved problems. A man who fixed things. Tonight, his daughter had been hurt, and someone would answer for that. "I'm looking for Ellie Collins," he said to the nurse at the reception desk, trying to keep his voice level. She was brought in after being hit by a car. The nurse glanced at his badge before checking her computer. "She's in Bay 4. The doctor is with her now." Robert followed the signs down a busy hallway, passing gurneys and worried families waiting for news. The hospital sounds washed over him: beeping monitors, hushed conversations, squeaking shoes on linoleum floors. He'd been in countless hospitals during investigations, but never like this, never for Ellie. He found Bay 4 and pulled back the curtain. His heart clenched at the sight of his daughter lying on the hospital bed, her face pale but alert. A doctor stood beside her, reviewing something on a tablet. "Dad." Ellie's face brightened when she saw him. Despite everything, she smiled. "You didn't have to rush over. I told them I was fine." Robert moved quickly to her side, taking her hand. "Not fine enough," he said, looking her over for injuries. "What happened?" Before Ellie could answer, the doctor spoke up. "Mr. Collins, I'm Dr. Chen. Your daughter has been very lucky. She has some bruising and a mild concussion, but no broken bones or internal injuries. We'll keep her overnight for observation, but she should make a full recovery." "Thank you," Robert said, relief momentarily overwhelming his anger. He turned back to Ellie. "Now tell me what happened." Ellie sighed. "I was crossing at the light on Maple Street. It was raining, and I guess this police officer didn't see me." She shrugged like it was nothing, but Robert saw her wince at the movement. "My chair got knocked over, but some people helped right away." "A police officer," Robert repeated, his jaw tightening. "Did you get his name?" "Dad, don't go all FBI on this. It was an accident." "An accident that put you in the hospital," Robert said. He looked at Dr. Chen. "Doctor, who was the officer that brought her in?" Dr. Chen hesitated. Actually, he didn't accompany her. The ambulance brought her, and other officers took statements at the scene. Robert's expression darkened. "So he hit my daughter with his car and didn't even come to the hospital." "Dad, please." Ellie reached for his hand. He looked really upset, like completely shaken. But Robert wasn't listening anymore. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Tom, it's Robert. I need a favor. An officer was involved in a traffic incident tonight on Maple Street. I need his name and record." He paused, listening. "Yes, it's personal. It's Ellie." After hanging up, he noticed Ellie watching him with concern in her eyes. For 16 years, it had been just the two of them, ever since Linda had died. Every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's appointment for her muscular dystrophy, every milestone had been there. And when she needed that wheelchair 3 years ago, he'd made sure it was the best one available. He'd always protected her. Until tonight. "You should rest," he told her gently, brushing hair from her forehead. "I'll be right here." "Promise you won't do anything crazy?" she asked, knowing him too well. "I promise to do what's right," he answered, which wasn't the same thing at all. An hour later, with Ellie finally asleep, Robert's phone buzzed. He stepped into the hallway to take the call. "I've got that information you wanted," Tom said. "Officer James Mercer, 5 years on the force. And Robert, there's something else. He's had 2 civilian complaints for reckless driving in the past year. Both were dismissed." "Dismissed?" Robert repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Who signed off on the dismissals?" "His uncle, Police Commissioner Wilson." Robert ended the call and leaned against the wall, the pieces falling into place. An officer with a history of reckless driving hits a disabled girl, then leaves the scene. No escort to the hospital. No follow-up. Just another incident to be swept under the rug. He looked through the doorway at his sleeping daughter. The anger that had been simmering inside him all night crystallized into something cold and hard. He wasn't just an FBI agent with 15 years of taking down criminals. He wasn't just a man who knew the system inside and out. He was a father who had just found his target. "Officer James Mercer," he whispered to himself. We're going to have a very interesting conversation, you and I." As he returned to Ellie's bedside, his mind was already assembling the case, piece by piece. Commissioner Wilson and his nephew thought they were untouchable. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Morning sunlight streamed through the hospital window as Ellie picked at her breakfast. The bruises on her arms had darkened overnight, painting purple shadows across her skin. She looked up when the door opened, expecting to see her father, but instead found a nurse. "Your dad called," the nurse said, checking Ellie's vitals. "He said he had to run a quick errand, but he'll be back for discharge." Ellie nodded, knowing exactly what kind of errand her father was running. She'd seen that look in his eyes before, the one that meant he was on a mission. She just hoped he wouldn't make things worse. Across town, Robert Collins sat in his unmarked car outside the police station, watching officers come and go. He'd been there since 6 in the morning, coffee growing cold in his cup holder as he waited. His FBI badge rested in his pocket, not for official use today. This was personal. His phone rang, Tom again, with more information. "I pulled Mercer's file," Tom said without greeting. "Got a friend in internal affairs to look it up. Those 2 complaints weren't the only ones, Robert. There's been 5 total, but 3 never made it into his official record." "Let me guess," Robert said, his eyes still on the station entrance. "The commissioner made them disappear." "You got it. 1 was another driving incident. 2 were excessive force complaints during arrests." Robert tightened his grip on the phone. "Send me everything you have." Just then, a police cruiser pulled into the lot. Officer James Mercer stepped out, looking like he hadn't slept all night. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, and his movements were sluggish as he walked toward the station. "I've got to go," Robert said, ending the call. He got out of his car and intercepted Mercer before he reached the steps. "Officer Mercer," he called. Mercer turned, his expression wary when he saw an unfamiliar face. "Can I help you?" "My name is Robert Collins," he said, watching recognition flash across the officer's face. "FBI, and the father of the girl you hit with your car last night." Mercer's face drained of color. "Mr. Collins, I was just about to check on her. How is she doing?" "She'll recover," Robert said coldly. "No thanks to you. You didn't even bother coming to the hospital." "I wanted to," Mercer said, his voice low. "I was told to give my statement and clear the scene. Standard procedure." "Standard procedure," Robert repeated with a bitter laugh. "Like those complaints against you that magically disappeared. That's standard procedure too." Mercer's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. Your uncle makes problems go away, doesn't he? 5 complaints in 2 years, only 2 on record. That's quite a cleanup job." A flash of something, anger, shame, crossed Mercer's face. "You've been investigating me." "I'm just getting started," Robert said, stepping closer. "My daughter could have died because you can't seem to drive properly. And I'm betting your uncle was already planning how to bury this incident too." "That's not," Mercer began, then stopped himself. He looked around the parking lot, then lowered his voice. "Look, it's not what you think. I tried to visit her last night. The desk sergeant said it would look like admitting guilt and ordered me to stay away. Convenient excuse." "It's the truth," Mercer insisted. "I feel terrible about what happened. I was at the end of a double shift. I looked down at my phone for 1 second. He ran a hand over his face. I know it doesn't excuse anything, but I want to make it right." "You can't make it right," Robert said, "but you can be held accountable." Before Mercer could respond, the station door opened and a senior officer stepped out. "Mercer, the commissioner wants to see you. Now." Mercer looked from the officer back to Robert. "I have to go." "This isn't over," Robert said. "I know," Mercer replied quietly. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry." Robert watched him walk away, analyzing his words, his body language, his expressions. 15 years in the FBI had taught him to read people, to separate lies from truth, and something about Mercer's apology had seemed genuine. But so had his fear when the commissioner was mentioned. Back in his car, Robert pulled out his laptop and connected to the FBI database. What he needed now was leverage, something that would crack open the wall of silence around Commissioner Wilson and his department. If they were willing to cover up for Mercer's driving incidents, what else were they hiding? By the time he returned to the hospital to pick up Ellie, Robert had already requested surveillance footage from businesses near the accident site, traffic camera data, and all of Wilson's communications for the past 6 months. The commissioner might have power in his department, but Robert had resources of his own. And unlike Mercer, he wasn't going to look away, not even for a second. 3 days after the accident, Ellie sat by her bedroom window, watching rain tap against the glass. Her bruises had faded from deep purple to a sickly yellow-green, but the headaches from her concussion still came and went. She turned when she heard the front door slam, followed by her father's heavy footsteps. Robert Collins appeared in her doorway, his tie loosened and dark circles under his eyes. He'd barely slept since the accident, spending every free moment digging into Officer Mercer's history and the police department's handling of complaints. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been in days. "Better," Ellie said. "Dad, we need to talk about what you're doing." Robert sighed and sat on the edge of her bed. "I'm just making sure the officer who hit you faces consequences." "But it's becoming more than that," Ellie said. "You're barely sleeping. You've taken time off work. It's like you're obsessed." "I'm doing my job," Robert insisted. "No, you're not. Your job is catching criminals, not launching a personal vendetta against one police officer who made a mistake." Ellie wheeled closer to him. "I saw his face right after it happened, Dad. He was horrified. He didn't hit me on purpose." Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and stood up. "I have to take this." "Dad." "We'll talk later, sweetheart." Ellie watched him leave, frustration building inside her. She grabbed her laptop and opened a browser. If her father wouldn't listen to her, maybe she needed to learn more about Officer Mercer herself. Meanwhile, in his small apartment across town, Officer James Mercer sat across from his union representative, Phil, a heavy-set man with 30 years on the force. "They're building a case against you," Phil said bluntly. "Collins is requesting every record related to you, every dashcam video, every complaint." "Let him," Mercer said. "I didn't do anything wrong." "Well, except hitting his daughter, which was an accident." Phil leaned forward. "Listen to me. This isn't just about the accident anymore. Collins is poking around in places the commissioner doesn't want him looking. He's already found out about those complaints that were handled internally." "You mean buried," Mercer said, his voice bitter. "Call it what you want. The point is, the commissioner is concerned. He wants you to lie low, say nothing to anyone, especially not to Collins." Mercer stood up and paced across his living room. "This isn't right. I made a mistake. I should own up to it, face whatever consequences come." "Noble speech," Phil said with a humorless laugh. "But this is bigger than you now. Collins is using FBI resources to investigate internal department matters without authorization. If the commissioner can prove that, Collins will lose his badge." "What?" Mercer stopped pacing. "He can't do that." "He can, and he will. The commissioner has friends in high places too." Phil stood up. "Just stay quiet and let this blow over. Don't talk to Collins." After Phil left, Mercer sat in his darkened apartment, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He thought about Ellie Collins, about the fear in her eyes when she'd fallen from her wheelchair. And he thought about her father, a man just trying to protect his daughter. With a sudden decision, Mercer grabbed his keys and headed for the door. At FBI headquarters, Robert sat in his supervisor's office, facing Director Walsh, a stern woman with 30 years of service behind her. "You used FBI resources to conduct an unauthorized investigation into a local police officer," Walsh said, her voice level but cold. "You accessed databases without filing proper requests. You pulled surveillance footage without warrants." "I'm investigating potential corruption," Robert argued. "Commissioner Wilson has been burying complaints against officers for years, not just his nephew." "That may be true," Walsh said, "but you're too personally involved. This officer hit your daughter. You cannot be objective." "So the corruption just continues?" Robert demanded. "No. If you have evidence of corruption, file an official request for investigation. But as of now, you're placed on administrative leave pending review." She held out her hand. "Your badge and gun, Agent Collins." Robert stared at her. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. This isn't a request." With stiff movements, Robert handed over his badge and weapon. This isn't about my methods. Someone's pulling strings to shut me down. That's exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that concerns me, Walsh said. Go home, Robert. Be with your daughter. Let the proper channels handle this. As Robert drove home, his phone rang with an unknown number. He answered, putting it on speaker. "Mr. Collins," said a voice he recognized as Officer Mercer's. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," Robert replied coldly. "You will after what I tell you," Mercer said. "Because you're right about the commissioner. And I have proof." Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone," Mercer said. "Meet me at Gray's coffee shop in an hour. Come alone." The call ended, leaving Robert to wonder if this was a trap or the break he'd been looking for. Either way, with his badge gone and his career in jeopardy, he had little left to lose. Gray's coffee shop sat on a quiet corner, its windows foggy from the steam of espresso machines inside. Robert arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a booth at the back where he could watch the door. He ordered coffee he didn't want and waited, checking his watch every few minutes. When Officer Mercer walked in, Robert almost didn't recognize him. Without his uniform, in jeans and a worn jacket, he looked younger, less sure of himself. He scanned the room, spotted Robert, and walked over. "Thanks for coming," Mercer said, sliding into the booth. "You said you had proof," Robert replied, not bothering with pleasantries. "Let's see it." Mercer glanced around before pulling out his phone. "First, I need to know something. Is this about getting justice for your daughter or exposing corruption in the department?" "Both," Robert said without hesitation. "Why does it matter?" "Because if it's just about me hitting your daughter, I'll turn in my badge tomorrow and face whatever charges come. But if it's about the corruption," Mercer's voice dropped lower, "that's bigger than either of us." Robert studied the man across from him. The officer looked tired, stressed, but there was something else in his eyes. Determination, maybe even a hint of hope. "Show me what you have," Robert said finally. Mercer unlocked his phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was an audio file. "This is a recording from last year. The commissioner talking to 4 officers about handling witnesses in a drug bust gone bad." Robert pressed play. Commissioner Wilson's voice filled his ears, instructing officers to make sure certain witnesses revised their statements about excessive force. Robert's jaw tightened as he listened. "There's more," Mercer said when the recording ended. "Documents showing pattern of cover-ups, not just for me but for dozens of officers. Complaints that disappear, evidence that goes missing." "Why are you giving me this?" Robert asked, pushing the phone back. "He's your uncle." Mercer's face hardened. "Because he's destroying the department. Good cops can't do their jobs right when bad ones get protected." He paused. "And because what happened with your daughter, it made me realize I've been part of the problem. Looking the other way, accepting the help when those complaints came in." Robert sat back, reassessing the man before him. "You realize this could end your career." "Maybe my career needs ending," Mercer said quietly. "At least this way, it means something." Before Robert could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. "Where are you?" "Someone came by looking for you." "A police officer." "Not in uniform." Robert showed Mercer the message. "You tell anyone about this meeting?" "No one," Mercer said, suddenly alert. "But the commissioner has people watching me." They both stood at the same time. "We need to go," Robert said. "Now." Outside, they walked quickly toward Robert's car. "I need to get home to Ellie," Robert said. "I'll follow in my car," Mercer offered, "just in case." Robert wanted to refuse, but something in the officer's expression stopped him. This wasn't the man he'd imagined these past days, not just a reckless cop protected by his uncle. There was more to James Mercer than he'd thought. When they arrived at Robert's house 20 minutes later, Ellie answered the door, confusion crossing her face when she saw her father with Officer Mercer. "Dad, what's going on?" "Who came by looking for me?" Robert asked, guiding her back inside and checking the windows. "Some guy with a badge. Said he was from your office, but I didn't let him in." Ellie looked between the two men. "Why is he here?" She nodded toward Mercer. "It's complicated," Robert said. "Officer Mercer has information about corruption in the police department. We're working together." Ellie's eyebrows shot up. "Working together? You've spent the last week trying to destroy him." "Things have changed," Robert said, closing the curtains. Mercer stepped forward. Ellie, I wanted to say in person how sorry I am about the accident. There's no excuse for what happened. Ellie studied him for a long moment. You tried to visit me in the hospital, didn't you? They wouldn't let you. Mercer nodded. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I knew it, Ellie said, looking at her father. I told you he wasn't some monster. Robert's phone rang, a familiar number. It's Tom from the office, he said, answering. Tom, what's? Robert, you need to be careful. Tom's voice came through, urgent and low. They're pulling all your files, checking your cases. Word is the commissioner called in some favors with the FBI director. They're building a case against you. Unauthorized use of resources, misuse of position, even harassment. They can't make that stick, Robert said. They don't need to make it stick forever. Just long enough to shut down whatever you're doing. Tom paused. Watch your back, Robert. After hanging up, Robert looked at Mercer. They're moving faster than I thought. We don't have much time. What do we do now? Mercer asked. Robert's eyes narrowed with determination. Now we stop playing defense. It's time we take everything you have and go public. The next morning, Robert's living room had transformed into a war room. Papers covered the coffee table, laptop screens glowed with documents, and a whiteboard leaned against the wall with names and connections mapped out in Robert's precise handwriting. Ellie rolled in with a tray of coffee mugs balanced on her lap. You two look terrible, she said, handing mugs to her father and Officer Mercer, who had dark shadows under their eyes from working through the night. Thanks for the encouragement, Robert said with a tired smile. He took a long sip of coffee and turned back to the evidence they'd assembled. Mercer had delivered more than Robert expected: audio recordings, internal memos, witness statements that differed from official reports. Together, they'd painted a damning picture of Commissioner Wilson's department: excessive force complaints buried, evidence tampered with, officers protected from consequences. The city council meeting is tomorrow, Mercer said, checking his phone. Wilson is scheduled to give his quarterly report. It's public, press will be there. Perfect timing, Robert nodded. But we need to be careful. If Wilson gets wind of what we're planning. The doorbell rang, cutting him off. All three froze. Are you expecting anyone? Mercer asked quietly. Robert shook his head and moved toward the window, carefully peering out. It's Director Walsh. Your boss, Mercer whispered. The one who suspended you? The very same. Robert turned to Ellie. Take everything into your room. Quick. As Ellie gathered the papers and Mercer helped collect the laptops, Robert went to answer the door. Director Walsh stood on the porch, her expression unreadable. Director, Robert said coolly, this is unexpected. We need to talk, Collins. She looked past him into the house. Privately. Robert hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my daughter. Walsh entered the living room just as Ellie returned, her wheelchair leaving faint tracks in the carpet where coffee had spilled. If Walsh noticed the hastily cleared evidence, she didn't comment. I've been reviewing your claims about Commissioner Wilson, Walsh said without preamble. And some concerning information has come to my attention. Let me guess, Robert crossed his arms. Wilson called you. Told you I'm on some vengeful crusade because of what happened to Ellie. Actually, no. Walsh's expression softened slightly. One of your colleagues came forward, showed me communications between Wilson and several highly placed officials, including someone in our bureau. She paused. It seems Wilson has been trading favors for years, helping bury misconduct in other agencies in exchange for them doing the same for his officers. Robert glanced at Ellie, whose eyes had widened. This goes beyond your suspension, Collins, Walsh continued. But I need to know what you have before I can act. How do I know I can trust you? Robert asked. Ellie rolled forward. Dad, maybe we should. The sound of breaking glass cut her off. Something crashed through the kitchen window, filling the room with thick smoke. Get down, Robert shouted, rushing to Ellie. More glass shattered as the front window broke. Through the growing smoke, Robert could see dark figures moving on the lawn. Back door. Mercer appeared from the hallway, grabbing Ellie's wheelchair. Now. They rushed toward the rear of the house, Walsh following close behind. As they burst into the backyard, a police cruiser screeched to a halt in the alley. This way. Walsh pointed toward her unmarked car parked down the street. As they ran, Robert supporting Ellie with Mercer carrying her folded wheelchair, shots rang out behind them. Not bullets, rubber rounds, the kind used for riot control. One hit Mercer in the shoulder, sending him stumbling. "Keep going," he gasped, regaining his balance. They reached Walsh's car, piling in as more cruisers appeared at both ends of the street. Walsh gunned the engine, swerving around a blockade as officers shouted for them to stop. "Wilson must have found out what we're doing," Robert said, looking back at the officers now returning to their vehicles for pursuit. "It's worse than that," Walsh replied grimly, taking a sharp turn. "Those weren't regular officers. That was the Commissioner's Special Response Team. They answered directly to him, outside normal channels." "Where are we going?" Ellie asked, her voice steady despite everything. "Somewhere safe," Walsh assured her. "I have friends Wilson doesn't know about." Mercer leaned forward from the back seat. "We still have the evidence. Most of it's backed up online." Robert looked at him, then at Director Walsh, then finally at his daughter. "Then we stick to the plan. Tomorrow, the city council meeting." His expression hardened. "Wilson thinks he can intimidate us. He just proved everything we've been saying about him." As the car sped through side streets, avoiding main roads where police might be waiting, Robert's phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Tom. "Wilson calling emergency closed session with council tonight. Something big. Watch yourself." Robert showed the others. "He's moving faster than we thought." "So do we," Walsh said, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. "Change of plans. We're not waiting for tomorrow." City Hall glowed against the night sky, its old stone walls lit up by floodlights. Inside, Commissioner Wilson stood at the podium in the council chambers, his voice echoing through the half-empty room. Only council members and a few reporters attended the hastily called emergency session. "As I've outlined, these accusations against our department are completely unfounded," Wilson said, his confident smile never wavering. "Agent Collins has been suspended by the FBI for misuse of resources and is clearly pursuing a personal vendetta after his daughter's unfortunate accident." In the gallery, a door quietly opened. Robert, Mercer, Walsh, and Ellie entered silently, staying in the shadows at the back. Ellie's wheelchair had been repaired, and she held a laptop on her knees. "Everything is under control," Wilson continued. "I recommend we issue a joint statement supporting our officer's end." "I have a question, Commissioner," Robert called out, his voice cutting across the room. Wilson froze mid-sentence. The council members turned in their seats as Robert walked down the center aisle toward the podium. "This is a closed session," Wilson said, recovering quickly. "Security." "Your security officers won't be coming," Director Walsh said, stepping forward to stand beside Robert. "They've been given different orders by people with higher authority than yours." Wilson's face darkened. "What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning is simple," Robert said, turning to address the council. "Commissioner Wilson has been covering up police misconduct for years. Not just minor infractions, but serious abuses of power." "These are baseless accusations from a man with a personal grudge," Wilson snapped. Mercer stepped forward, still in his police uniform despite everything. "They're not baseless. I know because I benefited from his cover-ups. My uncle buried complaints against me and other officers. I was wrong to accept it, and I'm here to set things right." A murmur ran through the council members. "This is absurd," Wilson said, but sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. "You have no proof." "Actually, we do," Ellie said, wheeling forward. She opened her laptop and connected it to the chamber's projection system. Recordings, documents, witness statements that never made it into official reports. The projection screen filled with files and folders, organized and labeled. "We have audio recordings of you instructing officers to tamper with evidence," Robert said. "Internal memos showing you buried excessive force complaints. Witness statements that were changed between initial interviews and official reports." "Play the Henderson recording," Mercer suggested quietly. Ellie clicked a file, and Wilson's voice filled the chamber. "I don't care what the witness originally said. Make sure the final statement matches what we need. This department protects its own." The color drained from Wilson's face. "We also have evidence of you trading favors with officials in other agencies," Walsh added, stepping forward. "Helping cover up their misconduct in exchange for them looking the other way on yours." One of the council members, an older woman with steel-gray hair, leaned forward. "Is this true, Commissioner?" Wilson's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape. "These recordings could be doctored. This is a setup." "The FBI has verified their authenticity," Walsh said, "and we're prepared to turn everything over to a special prosecutor." "My department has kept this city safe for years," Wilson said, his voice rising. "Sometimes that requires difficult decisions." "It requires upholding the law," Robert interrupted, "not breaking it whenever it's convenient." The council chambers had gone completely silent. Even the reporters were too stunned to take notes. "I've dedicated my life to this department," Wilson said, his bluster fading into something like desperation. "And you've corrupted it from the inside out," Mercer replied. "Officers like me thought we were above the law because you taught us we were." The council chairperson stood up. "I believe we've had enough. This session is now open to the public." She nodded to the security officer at the door, who opened it to reveal a crowd of reporters and citizens who had gathered outside, drawn by rumors of the confrontation. "And Commissioner Wilson, consider yourself suspended pending a full investigation." 6 months later, Ellie sat in the sunshine outside the courthouse, watching her father shake hands with the new police commissioner, a woman with a reputation for fierce integrity who had been appointed after Wilson's resignation and indictment. Beside her, Officer Mercer, now working in community outreach rather than patrol, smiled. "Your dad did it. He changed the whole department." "We all did it," Ellie corrected him. "Sometimes accidents lead to unexpected places." "Speaking of which," Mercer said, "I've been meaning to ask if you'd speak at the police academy training next month. About what happened, about accountability. They could learn a lot from hearing your perspective." Ellie looked at her father, still talking with the new commissioner, then back at Mercer. "I think I'd like that." Robert walked over, smiling more easily than he had in months. "Ready to go. We've got that college tour this afternoon." "Criminal justice program, right?" Mercer asked. "Law school," Ellie corrected with a grin. "Someone's got to keep an eye on all of you." As they left the courthouse steps together, Robert glanced at Mercer. "Still coming for dinner Sunday?" "Wouldn't miss it," Mercer replied. Sometimes the worst moments in life became turning points toward something better. An accident, a father's determination, an officer's courage to admit mistakes. Together they had changed not just their own lives, but an entire system.